when we're done, everybody might be, yeah, we don't want that. So I'm not sure.
All right. And then anyone that's having any questions, please let me know. Let's try not to interrupt so much of the briefing and hold some of the questions till the end. But if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will direct them as appropriate or try to answer those questions as Mr. Thornton is giving his briefing. So Larry, take it away.
Okay. Thanks, James. So hi, everybody. So as James says, he and I have known each other for quite a few years, for a little over a decade now, I think, right about in there. So he said that this topic is on cybersecurity. So give you a little bit of a background. So if I can get this. There we go. So give you an idea, after I retired from the military, I taught for about 4 years. I taught in the DoD infrastructure for different certifications. So at the time, I became certified in pretty much, there was only one certification that CompTIA had that I didn't have, and that was only because we didn't teach it, so I wasn't required to get it. Other than that, I had pretty much everything that CompTIA had. I have a few Microsoft certifications too. I just didn't put them on here. After a while, I only put this stuff on the slide just because people tell me that it's impressive. You should put it out there. And I'm thinking that I have like 25, 26 certifications. It's just, for me at this point, it's more of a time consuming thing for me just to keep track of them. So I am all of these that you see that are listed, they are current. I do keep them current. So this isn't something that I did in the past, and it's like I'm just putting it on a slide.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah. Huh?
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, I am. Can you guys see it?
Can't see your screen. No.
Oh, wow. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can, sir. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought I had clicked the share button. So anyway, so it's everything that you see on the slide is all current. So I have Cisco certifications. I have ITIL v4. I actually taught that class. We had another Cisco instructor. He taught Cisco. Pretty much everything CompTIA Microsoft is what I taught. So on the security side of the house, I pretty much have, the only thing I don't have is pen test, because when I started my job at the state, they had just come out with pen test. So it was something that I didn't pick that certification up. But everything else that they had on the security side of the house, I have. I will say this, when it comes to the CASP exam, that's a 3-hour exam, and it is no joke. It's as James said, I've been doing this for a couple of days, and that it took me about 2 hours and 45 minutes to get all the way, complete with that thing. So that joke is that exam is pretty intense. One of the things that I was considering, and just kind of let you guys in on a little bit of a joke. So I prepped these slides. I put this content together a couple days ago, and I was like, I kind of like this. This is, and then when I went back to because I had it open on my computer, and then I went back and I made some tweaks to it today, and I lost the entire slideshow. So I recreated the slideshow today. So it's one of those deals that the content was one of the things that I was looking for. Is there's so many different topics, different areas to be covered within the cybersecurity security realm. What should we look at? There's a total, if you're wondering how many slides does this guy have and how long is he going to drone on for? I have a total of about 54 slides. as we go through the first about 12 slides, this kind of sets a baseline for cybersecurity. After that, the slides flow pretty quickly. We'll actually be done with them before you know it. And then it'll be more of an interaction between you and I. If there are any questions as I'm going through things, feel free to throw them into chat. James will get my attention, and I'll try to answer them. If it's something that you can hold to the end, please, because I intend to make plenty of time to where we can actually have a dialogue back and forth. The focus, as you'll see as I'm going through this, when we get into it, the focus that I looked at on this was not so much networks, network topologies, things of that nature, different encryptions, symmetric versus asymmetric, key pairs versus non-key pairs, AES, DES, triple DES. Those things are important to know for the security practitioner that's going to go out there and work in the IT field as a security person. However, there's other things that I have seen over the years that routinely come up that are actually shortfalls in most organizations, whether it be a Soho small office, home office, all the way up to a major enterprise entity organization that's spread out across, multiple states with multiple locations and offices. And I'll touch on some of those as we go through it. So what I've kind of the focus of this is kind of a threats. How do we treat threats? How do we break threats down? Some of the responsibilities that you as a practitioner, security practitioner, incident response, kind of an idea of, okay, what do we do? How do we respond? How are there steps? Also incident plans, incident response plans, and of that nature. So I kind of went on that track. Again, like I said, because I have habitually seen over the years, especially over the last probably 15 years, organizations miss this repeatedly, and it's literally cost them millions upon millions of dollars. Because they've been attacked, hacked, suffered ransomware attacks, and it's cost them because they had no plan, they had no team, they had nothing in place. So with that, we'll get started here. So cybersecurity, we kind of look at that, the question sometimes it comes out, what is it? How do we define it? And basically, it's the protection of end user devices, servers, storage from unauthorized access. Also, caveat on that is it's a further to prevent damage, theft, or loss due to the unauthorized access. Cybersecurity basically can be categorized into 5 distinct types. You have the critical infrastructure, application network, cloud, and Internet of Things. Internet of Things is a coined term that's basically come out, I would probably say, in about the last 6 to 7 years, really. But since it's out there and it's pretty common now. Cloud security has come on to be, it has changed face over the probably, I would say, the last 6 years, 7 years. 8 years now, because 2015 was the last time they had a really big focus on anything to do with cloud security and how they were going to do it and how they were going to treat people. One of the biggest changes, and I'll just touch on it and throw it out there real big, from 2015 to now, was the fact that nowadays all of your major cloud service providers will no longer guarantee that your data or whatever you use or have in their environment is 100% protected. It's one of those things that they change that to where it's now the responsibility of the end user. Your While data is in transit, again, it's on you because it's best effort over the internet. So they've changed a lot of the wording and a lot of the responsibility where they were taking it, saying, "Yeah, bring it to us. We'll secure it. You don't have to worry." When you get into the fine details, that's not there anymore. Um, they've done away with that. Something else about cybersecurity, basically four principles: governing, protect, detect, and respond. You'll see that come into play as we get into threats, threat analysis, and actual responding. Um, One of the things that one of my uh, team members, one of my friends told me, he said, if one of the things that you should touch on, because it's sometimes or many times forgotten or overlooked, is the CIA triad: the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That also kind of goes hand in hand with your AAA concept of authentication, authorization, and access. Um, Not really knowing your full backgrounds as I go through stuff, not knowing how far now, many of you might be in the IT industry now, and you're just working on, uh, getting another degree or your first degree or whatever. A lot of this information you may know. But one of the things that I found is there's a misunderstanding that authentication, once you're authenticated, that automatically gives you access to the network. It does not. Authentication only means that, kind of like what it says here: you've been authenticated, verifies the user identity, and then do you have authorization? And then that gets into, what do I have access to? I've been authenticated and authorized. What exactly do I have access to? Depending on what your roles and responsibilities are within an organization, you as a security practitioner would be working closely with your domain administrators, your Active Directory folks, to set up those, you know, roles and responsibilities, especially depending on the organization you work for. I know of a R&D organization that is up in Renton, that they have very, very strict rules, um, right down to even just entering the building. Um, it's so things to take into consideration. And one thing that's always been kind of a pet peeve of mine, is kind of my psychic wound, is the OSI model. James probably laughing at me right now, but the in
Nope.
all the classes that I taught, I always had this slide in there for one basic reason. And I would tell everybody, if you understand the OSI model and you actually, no kidding, actually truly understand the different layers and what is happening on the different layers and how things are put together and how they're taken apart, depending on whether traffic is coming in or traffic is going out, um, then it will only enhance your skill set when you're troubleshooting or trying to define something that's happened, when you're, doing a threat analysis or you're in an incident response situation. If you happen to be on one of those teams, just kind of for the focus of what this discussion is, this particular layout, I actually put this together myself. This is kind of my creation to kind of give folks an idea of where, you know, uh, layer one, layer two, the LLC is kind of layer 2.5. If you understand the link local, if you understand that layer of what's happening right in here, um, between layer two and layer three, marrying up of that MAC address along with the actual IP address. And uh, a lot of people don't even know that that even happens. And it's working, right there within the frames. So frames, packets, and segments. You have your PDU layers coming in from layer 3, 4, and 5. And then you have your SDU layers, uh, on your upper layers. So, and then I put this in here for that way when I talked about IPsec, people knew actually where authentication headers, the encapsulated security payload, where those things fail, where they fall at within an actual packet. And then you have your pad and your trail. This is your frame check sequence number and your checksum value for your hash, and your payload. Many of you, and again, like I said, if this is something that you already know and you get, please, not trying to, insult anybody's intelligence, just kind of throw on some stuff out there that I find that people routinely miss when they talk about MTU size. MTU size is directly related to your data of your payload size. Your total packet is, for those of you who've actually, logged in and seen, this is a very simplified, almost oversimplified version of what a packet actually looks like. There's a whole lot more that runs out over here and runs out, on the backside. Sorry about that. Go back. But the MTU size, which is standard from Microsoft, 1500. Actually, the MTU size, up until about 10 years ago, was a proprietary standard for Microsoft, but it has become such the norm that it's just the accepted industry standard now. 1500 is the baseline MTU size. Many agencies now, because of cloud advancements in technology, jumbo frames, data centers, huge data centers. Most organizations, we do it at the state. Most enterprise level organizations do it. They just, it's pretty much a standard now to set on devices, routers and such. Payload, MTU payload size is MTU is a 9960s, pretty standard, pretty regular. That way you don't run into any issues of, loss of packets, loss of traffic, which just adds to confusion later if you've got to go back and do any troubleshooting. So, any questions before I jump into the next part of this?
You all feel free to ask Larry any questions. This is something that I would agree with Larry 100%. So if I can summarize everything you just said, Larry, and
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong, if you have this foundation, you're going to go places.
Yes.
If you understand this foundation, this should assist you from a cybersecurity standpoint, where that threat could be possibly coming from and how they're using it from a networking perspective.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, is there any questions any of the students here have, or any comments, anything that they would like to add? Please feel free. Yep. Challenge him, pick his brain, please. All right, I guess not.
All righty. So we'll keep moving then. So risk, pretty simple, straightforward transition slides in here. So I threw a couple of things in here before we actually get into the threat portion of this. So types of network monitoring. This is another one of those things for security people, depending on which part of the field that you're working in. If you're working on the network side, you're not going to see too much of this. If you're working more on the policy side, or you're working on incident response, this becomes very key, bash, because now you're looking at how is the attack being propagated? How, is it behavior based? Is it an anomaly based? Is it signature based? Is it heuristic based? What is it? How is this happening? Which takes us basically to a really simple risk evaluation. Vulnerability is a weakness in a device, system, application, or process that might allow an attack to take place. Not that it will, just saying that, it might. A threat in a world of cybersecurity is an outside force that may exploit that vulnerability. So threats, risk, vulnerability, threat, as you can see here, the two circles in the center in the middle is you actually have risk. And then I just threw this matrix in here because I've been asked many times in the past by students that, that I've taught that, it's like, do you have something that I can take back with me? So I just kind of threw this risk matrix in there. Nowadays, you can Google risk matrix and you'll get about 100 of them that come up in images. So it's just a matter of picking one that fits the organization that you're with. So next, we're going to move into identifying instant impact, assembling a forensic toolkit. So one of the things that I kind of alluded to a minute ago was we talk about threats, we talk about vulnerabilities. That's my risk. That's how I determine that I have a risk, is I establish, hey, I have a vulnerability. So how does the bad guy or the hacker or the black hat, whatever you want to call them, how do they turn that into a threat vector to come in and attack us? So I actually put both of these together so you can see the actual steps in. This is a 4 steps to an attack from an outside source. This is 4 steps to testing if you're doing pen testing and you're on the inside. They're basically exactly the same. I'm doing a recon, footprinting. I'm identifying, doing, probing type of, not necessarily attacks, but probing type actions. They can be anything from port knocking to trying to do email scans I mean, there's a plethora of different ways that they could do this, but they're basically looking for and establishing vulnerabilities. Where are the vulnerabilities? Henceforth, the scanning portion. Once they've established there's a vulnerability or a weakness, then they start looking at the exploitation of how do I exploit the vulnerability? What type of course of action can I take? That's the enumerating part. And this portion sometimes takes a different path. One of the paths can be, I'm just going to do a DDoS attack. I'm going to launch a bunch of zombies out. I'm going to take over, let's say, 200 individual devices, and I'm going to use them unknowing to the end user. They're going to be part of I'm going to turn them into zombies because I'm going to launch bots out, turn them into zombies, and I'm going to use them to attack a specific device, whether it be a server, whether it be an interface, and it could be nothing more than what sometimes is referred to as a probing attack. I'm just going to probe to see, how does this agency, organization, how do they respond? Because that will give an attacking entity, a black hatter or whoever, or a pen tester, a wealth of information just seeing how the organization responds. Do they actually have a threat response plan? Do they have an incident response plan? Do they actually follow the plan? Just because you have one and it's got dust on it sitting on the shelf you haven't looked at in 8 years, is it even accurate anymore? And as they develop and gather information from, exploiting and doing some probing, they may determine that, hey, this company organization is a prime target for ransomware. Usually ransomwares, if it's a big organization, they're going to incorporate and look for assistance and help from other black hats, maybe other hacker families. They're going to combine their resources. So it takes a lot for them to put together an actual attack, which is something that's somewhat kind of a fallacy, because I think a lot of people they think that, oh, well, they attack that organization. They could turn around and attack them tomorrow. They didn't get in today, but they could get in tomorrow. Not necessarily true, because usually it takes a lot of resources, a lot of effort on the attacker's part to set up that one-time attack to get in. So kind of gives you a little bit of an idea how the 4 steps to an attack are exactly the same as 4 steps to testing. If you're a white box tester, a gray box tester, depending, pen tester, you're going to follow the exact same steps. So now we're going to jump into threats. Now we start getting to the meat and potatoes of actually what we're going to talk about. So basically threat classifications. Basically what it really boils down to is we have known threats and we have unknown threats. You have internal threats and you have external threats. Probably the most damaging of all threats is the internal threat because they're usually unknown, unexpected. Sometimes something happens, it was unintended, but if it was an exploitation of an internal unknown threat, they're going to cause probably the most havoc, the most damage, that's going to be the most long lasting and take probably months, if not years, to recover from, depending on what they gain access to. So this is just kind of a real quick definition. I'll give you a few seconds, probably while I was talking. Most of you probably read that. Coming down here, like it says, security analysts should have a clear understanding of the classes of threats that they may face. Once an incident's been placed in one of these classifications, options that are available for classifications are considered. So as I move into the next slide, pretty much I already touched on this. So talking about known and unknown threats. There's multiple security products out there. There's multiple ways that you can monitor networks and look for vulnerabilities, everything from cloud vulnerabilities to malware to network vulnerabilities to end user device vulnerabilities. There's all kinds of different applications and software that are used that are part of your toolbox as a security practitioner at your disposal, also depending upon the organization and what they have and what they're going to resource for you. There are many things that you can use that are out there that are absolutely free that you can just download and just run. So now we're getting, like I said, we're getting into the meat and potatoes portion of this. So now we talk about threat assessments. So basically a threat, anything that can harm your resources and could potentially result in a security violation. Really, we have 3 kinds. You have environmental, you have man-made, internal, and external, which I already had mentioned before. Again, talked about vulnerability and exploitation. Identifying, is there a vulnerability? Is there a weakness? Is there something that can be acted upon by a threat actor to do damage to your organization? How are they going to exploit it? And then what I just said was, about being a threat vector. What path or tool is the threat actor actually going to use if they decide to launch an attack and exploit the vulnerability that they found? So threat assessment in and of itself is a formal process, really, of you want to look at and examine potential threats and likelihoods that they may occur. If security practitioners are doing their job in an organization, hopefully if they're being proactive, they've already looked at the network, they've already looked at the domain infrastructure, they've already looked at the different trusts that may exist between different domains, they've already looked at the GPOs, the rule sets, they've looked at the logging, they've looked at the inner, medium, and outside security. They've looked at the physical, they've looked at the virtual, they've looked at all the different aspects of the environment, and they've made an assessment, hopefully, and they've already pre-identified if there are any vulnerabilities. It's basically what you're doing there is you're doing a risk assessment, you know. So one of the key things, and you'll see it again when we get to the slides about risk. So it's how do we do a risk assessment? Well, the big thing is the easiest way to start one is identify what's the most valuable. What are you protecting? What is it that your organization doesn't want people to get to? There are some things that are mandated by law, like PII, personal identifiable information, financial information, data records, R&D, research and development. There's legal ramifications to how long that you have to keep financial records. If you deal with anything with the health industry, that brings a whole other set of rules and legal ramifications of what you have to track and how you handle that information, for HIPAA rules, and electronic personal information. So that's part of the risk assessment. There's a lot of different methodologies out there. And again, if you Googled it, you'd probably get 20 right off the bat. They're all going to have basically the same steps, but there's going to be a tweak or a difference to each one of them. Basically, what we're looking for, what it boils down to, what needs to be protected, who and what are the threats and the vulnerabilities? Have we already identified them? Have we been proactive and done our job? What are the implications if they were damaged or lost? What is the value to the organization? So then we look at threat assessments from the environment. So one of the things that we have to take into consideration here is we have Mount Rainier that's about, a century past, due for blowing its roof off, kind of like, Taylor did. And then you have, we have some flooding. We've had some flooding from, when the Puyallup River. So occasionally we don't suffer too much from that. The other big thing that we have up here is we have earthquakes. We have earthquakes that go on up here constantly. They're usually so minor that most people don't even feel them. Every once in a while, we'll get a pretty good shaker here. It's been quite a few years since we had a pretty good shaker here, but I was here when the last big one that, it shook for several seconds, and it caused quite a bit of damage. You also have man-made, vandalism, terrorism. Already talked about the internal and then external. And one of the things that also falls into your risk assessment is going to be a business impact analysis. And it's basically a tool of the BCP that identifies business functions and quantifies the impact of loss to the business. So we as the security folks, we as the network IT guys and gals, we don't get too wrapped around the finances. It's not that big of a thing to us one way or the other. However, the business side of the house, they get real wrapped around it. So, you know, uh, this table right here is kind of in short, you have, if an incident occurs, what is the maximum tolerable downtime? How long can an organization be down before they start losing money? Guaranteed, the bosses and the business side of the house is going to want to know. Mean time to repair, what is the average time required to repair a single resource or function if something happens? Mean time between failures is usually something that floats over into life cycle, but it also can be applied here in estimating if you have a failing device needs to be replaced, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. You can use MTBF to actually factor in and give the business folks a heads up You have a recovery time objective, which is the shortest time period after a disaster or disruption or incident has occurred. Work time recovery kind of goes hand in hand with the RTO and the MTD. And then you have a recovery point objective. That is the point of time to which a disrupted resource or function must be returned back to full operational status. So to give you an idea, I've actually used the RTO, RPO, MTTR, and the MTBF. And at the state, we actually had a failing um, storage, and I actually used that to plan out when certain trays were going to fail because, as hard drives started failing more and more, and then we had an entire tray fail. And it was like, so I effectively used that to predict, hey, if we don't have everything moved off by this date, we're going to lose roughly about 89 terabytes worth of state information that will be irrecoverable. Because this, I actually missed. So long story short, I missed it by being right on the nose for. I hit the day, but the time frame, I was 8 hours off. So everybody gave me a hard time because I missed it by 8 hours. But catastrophic failure. The storage completely failed, was non-recoverable. We had moved off everything that was essential to the state of Washington 2 weeks prior. So based off of using those 4 things right there. So it does work. You just got to plug in the numbers. Again, you can Google that, and they have many examples of where you plug the numbers in. This goes in, like I said, this supports your business impact analysis. And I have down at the bottom there high availability of 5 nines uptime. This basically means that your environment will not be down for more than 5.3 minutes in a single year. So that means you're going to be operational 24/7, 365 days. You will not be down longer than 5.3 minutes for any reason, irregardless of man-made, environmental, attack, incident. Doesn't make any difference. So there's only one organization that I know that actually meets that uptime, and that's Google. Because once they brought their final constellation online back in 2013, 2014, they became Skynet. So pretty much be impossible to crash them. So, and then that's just more the business impact analysis. This kind of goes along with that business. So you have the exposure factor. The portion of asset value is likely to be damaged or destroyed by a threat, often expressed as a percentage. Asset value, an asset's defined as any item that has positive economic value to the organization. And then they break it down even further to where they get into single loss expectancy. What happens if we only have one incident? How do we plan for and put that into the budget? If you actually get a receptive business side of the house that says, hey, we hear you security guys, we're actually going to plan for a worst case scenario. You give us a one worst case scenario and what it'll cost, we'll plan it into the budget. This is what you would use to do that very thing. Occasionally you'll get an organization that they'll actually say, hey, do that. Very good friend of mine. She was one of my students. She was on incident response team for a major organization up north. She flew to the state that this organization was in. They were suffering a ransomware attack. They had paid, I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere in excess of $20 million to the hackers to get the passwords back, to get it unlocked. They paid the ransom The ransom was collected. They never got any of the passwords. They were spread out in 7 different states with something like 60 different locations. They were hemorrhaging money, millions on top of what they paid out. Bottom line is they had no incident response plan. They had no security team. They had nothing. So, you know, um, Mary and her team, they went in, they did an assessment. They said, this is what we can do for you. This is what it's going to cost you. And they said, okay, can you save anything? They went in, they saved about less than 25% of the information because it was pretty well locked down. I mean, it took them, that project lasted 6 months. And a lot of that time was spent them just trying to break in to try to save stuff. Eventually, it came to a point where the organization said, we're losing too much money. Just shut it, rebuild everything brand new, roll everything over to the new environment and shut the old one down. So you can imagine what that ended up costing them. So they spent, several millions, tens of millions of dollars, just because they didn't have a plan. They had no idea even how to respond to the ransomware attack. They paid the ransom within the first 48 hours. It's kind of amazing. And then your annualized rate of occurrence, is it going to happen? Do you expect maybe it'll happen once a year? Could it happen maybe twice a year? Here again, these are both gives you annual loss expectancy, another formula for you. And this kind of gives you an example of what that might be. Suppose an asset's valued at 100,000 with 25% exposure to a threat. Calculate it out. So you say that it's maybe could happen 2 times a year. So SLE and RAO of 50,000 is basically your 25,000. So this is what they're going to allot for, in the budget. Any questions so far? I've covered quite a bit of information, quite a bit of material. I got roughly about 10 slides left. We're cruising right along. So these are some factors to think about when you're considering incident severity and prioritization. Critical, urgent, important, normal, non-essential. This will help you prioritize and build your incident response plan. One thing I can tell you, and James will probably tell you in the course whenever you get to this subject matter, if you are the security person that's sitting in the room when something happens and everybody's going, what do we do? If you're the person that stands up and says, I've already put a plan together, here's what we do, you will be the hero. You will become instantaneously noticed by everybody from the top of that organization down. And you just created your own value to that organization. 100%. Because I can't count the number of rooms that I've sat in to where the boss is sitting there going, what do we do? This is happening to us. Does anybody have an idea? Do they have a plan? Do we go to somebody? And it crickets in the room. Nobody says anything. And then, somebody like me, because I've done it, put my hand in the air. And it's like, well, if nobody's got anything to say, here, I've got a plan for you. I know James has done the same thing. Me and him have talked about similar stuff, it's like, man, I was doing X, Y, and Z and nobody had a clue. And I did this, this, and this. And he was like, yeah, man, he's like, I, had the similar experience. All the people I know that have been in the industry for any length of time, they all have stories like that to where they're sitting in a room or on a call in a video where there's 30 people in there. Nobody has a clue. And one person, usually one of us, says, I got a plan. I cannot emphasize enough how much that is going to bolster you within that organization. Mission essential functions, part of the BIA. Core activities. This is critical. This is why I put this in here. Single points of failure. And single points of failure don't only apply to hardware, software, they also apply to people. Because if you become that go-to person and you have created your own value in that organization, you must also think of yourself as a single point of failure. What happens to that organization if you're not there on the day that something bad happens?
I call Larry.
I call James.
I called in sick.
Well, that happens. That works too. The other part of that is how well is the team trained? Is there something there that if something happens that they can go grab that book off the shelf, or or if they do call you, you can say, hey, go to my desk, such and such folder. It's all right there for you. I left this slide in here for one reason. And before I go through this, I'm going to ask the question, what do you think is the most important of the 5? What is the most important thing to the president, CEO of an organization, company? Which is the most important out of all of those?
Life? Reputation?
Good guess. Anybody else?
Finance.
Reputation is the most important thing. Sounds crazy, but most organizations, when you get into the nuts and bolts and you're sitting in the room behind closed doors, reputation of the organization trumps everything else. Every time. I've seen it happen more than one organization. I just sit there and shake my head.
I agree with that 100%. And I would caveat that, Larry, with when you say that reputation matters, is if y'all remember Target and what happened with their point of sales, it not happened only once, but it happened twice in the same year.
Yep.
Rock you.
For those who like to shop at Target, I'm sure that there's some people who decided they were not going to shop at Target.
Yep.
There's also the rock you.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
that's a very good, that's a great example, was the Target example,
Yeah.
I mean, that cost them big time. Took them years to recover from that. So some of these slides here, I put in here just to talk about incident management, and different things. Basically it's comprised of incident response and then how do you handle it? Identifying it. You've already heard me talk about a lot of the things, these slides that I'm getting ready to go through, because we're coming into the end of the slides. The incident response plan, you've heard me say that probably a dozen times already. Now, and basic entry points for an attacker: scanning, data breach, malicious code, denial of service. How did they get in? That goes back to the OSI model. Where did they come in on? What layer did they come in on? Incident response plan, the IRP, roles and responsibilities. That should be defined for the different individuals on your team. Otherwise, you'll spend a lot of time arguing and you're not going to get a lot done. And the first 24 hours is going to be the most critical for you. Reporting requirements are both internal and external. You should have one person on the team that all they do is they document everything and they report in and out. If law enforcement has to be involved, they're going to let them know. If they don't, okay, so be it. They definitely going to keep your stakeholders informed, and they're going to keep upper management informed, because those folks are going to bug you to death. Give them a single point of contact. That way they can bug them and you can do your job. Escalation. Escalation is important to know. That's and identify. That's why I say your first 24 hours is really important, because if it's beyond your skill set or resources, say you're a local, a local shop out of a regional business, you may not have the resources. You got hit, but you don't have the resources to take care of it. Identify that, escalate it up. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this is beyond what we have here for resources to handle. And then identifying who's going to be the team, who's going to actually do and be on it. That goes back to roles and responsibilities. And then the actual part of the incident response itself, which is really is pretty simple, straightforward. Detect is going to be easy to do because there was an incident. How are you going to respond to it? The reporting, that is covered by, I said, documenting and pointing that somebody who's going to be the point of contact for that. Recover, can we recover from it? Did we catch it in time? If not, what do we need to remediate? If we didn't catch it and we lost something, then how do we remediate and mitigate the amount of damage done? And then review afterwards and look at it and go, okay, what were the lessons learned from this? How do we do better? How do we prevent this from happening again? And then we get into basic, data destruction and media sanitization. That usually happens after an incident because you find a whole bunch of stuff that you need to take care of. So really it boils down to one of three things: clearing it, purging it, or destroying it. And then how do you destroy it? Is it internal? Okay. If it's external, you most definitely want to get a certificate of destruction, because when you close out your incident, you want those certificates in there. I won't bore you with the purging and wiping, because I'm sure all of you have probably done that and you are familiar with that. Classification and labeling is an important thing. Depending upon how it is labeled and how it is classified in an organization also will dictate how it is destroyed. Unclassified and sensitive and confidential, you can usually do just by wiping. Secret, top secret, or, however the civilian organization you're with has named classifications at that level. Those are physical destruction only. Nothing else is acceptable. Different types of handling: confidential, proprietary, public, and private. And then lastly, coming into, I already touched on this before about personal identifiable information and your protected health information. Data retention. What are your data retention policies? Those usually you'll find after an incident, those also get updated right along with the storage policy. Also, your legal compliance policy also gets updated. Funny how that all happens around an incident. Henceforth, that's why the slides are in this presentation for you. And that was pretty much everything, folks. Leaves us with about 5 minutes. Questions, comments?
From my perspective, Larry, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so I really appreciate your time and you being here. And I know these students will appreciate a really good inside look to kind of what you do from not just a daily basis, but what you have done, what you have created, what you have contributed to these folks from a cyber standpoint, and what you're continuing to do to make sure that folks are secure, and even just from the state's perspective. So I'd implore folks to please, if you have any questions, ask Mr. Thornton if he has any questions, either about his experience, anything on the slide deck that you heard, any scenarios you may have. Please feel free to ask any questions. Now this is y'all's time.
Yeah, by all means, throw it out there.
Larry. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, so I was gonna ask a question.
Sure.
Can you go back to slide 38 or 39, I think? So you were talking about the important factors for a company when there's a breach?
Yeah, let me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up the
Not a
PowerPoint
problem.
again.
Not a problem. I have it. While I'm doing that, does anybody else have any questions while I'm getting this for Andrew?
Were you talking about the 5 right there, Andrew? Sorry, Ollie.
I think so. So he, I think my speaker cut out at that moment, but he was talking about the.
Which one was the most important to an organization?
Right. So you were saying that the most important factor is reputation. However, on your slide, it says the number one is human life. And I think I'm missing
that's what the books, because that's what the book says. It's what and if you Google it, that's exactly what Google's going to tell you. Anytime you take a class, they're going to have life as the highest priority, because nobody's going to tell you that it's the reputation. But having been the person sitting in there representing a security team in those boardrooms and conference rooms, I've seen executives, I've had them look at me and go, cost doesn't matter. We don't care. Protect the reputation of the company. Save whatever you need to save. And it's like, so cost doesn't matter, loss of property. They're like, nope, we don't care. Doesn't make any difference. Save the reputation. Reputation is the most important thing to us, because it will impact us and hurt us financially much longer. Because that's what the bottom line, that's what they're looking at. It's the finances long term. Reputation hurts them long term. They lose money. So, I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from, Andrew. I get it. That's why, I made the statement that I've walked out of those rooms before, shaking my head going, man, that makes absolutely no sense to me, but okay, you're the boss.
Okay.
Perfect example is what James brought up. Target. Target managed to keep that quiet for almost 18 months that they had been hit, and it had cost them.
That was 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, about 12 years ago now. But it's the sheer fact that they were so afraid of their reputation that once it did get out, it did exactly what their greatest fear was. It hurt them, cost them millions in revenue, because people were like, oh, wait a minute, you don't have a secure system when I go pay? Oh, I'm not going to shop there. Same thing happened with Home Depot within the same 3-year time period. Home Depot got hit. Home Depot managed to keep it quiet for a very long time. But again, once it leaked out, it did hurt them, but not quite as bad as it did Target. Home Depot has a much more focused clientele. Other questions?
Larry, I just want to say thank you for your presentation today. It was really clear, and especially for students who are interested in cybersecurity, I think it was a good session. And I just want to say that Dean wanted to join today, but he had an important meeting, but he did ask me to send his regard and appreciation for your time today.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it. Anybody else got any questions or anything?
Thank you very much for the great presentation, Larry. This is Ali. I have one question.
Sure, fire away.
We have a lot of students that come from non-related backgrounds to cybersecurity and tech. And their hope is coming to our programs to get a cybersecurity related job.
Yep.
A lot of due to the importance and sensitivity of those jobs, it's kind of a hassle for students to get a job, entry-level job. So do you have any word of advice for those type of students?
Yeah, funny that you mentioned that. So the young lady that I told you about, so she was a student in my probably this end of the first year that I was teaching. She came to me one day during lunch and she said, "Tell me about this IT thing," because it was not her background. And I'm like, "Okay, what do you want to know?" And she's like, "Well, is it a lucrative field to get into?" But I said, "It can be." I said, "Well, depends on what you want to do." I said, "If you want to go into the security aspect," I said, "it's big bucks out there. You get about 5 to 7 years of experience underneath your belt, you could pretty much dictate your own price wherever you go, if you have the reputation to back up the experience." And she's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Getting $120,000, $130,000 a year job, that's baseline. You go up from there." And she's like, "Wow." She's like, so long story short, her and I talked off and on during the course of the next week while I was teaching. She came back about a month later to another one of my classes, and she said, "I've decided to do IT." She actually had a degree, master's. She was a counselor, marriage therapy type counselor person. She worked at a clinic in Tacoma. She said, "I've quit my job. I'm doing this 100%. I'm 100% focused on this." I kind of looked at her and said, "Well, I guess that's one way to do it. All or nothing. Jump in all the way up to your eyebrows." So she ran into the same problem there in the very beginning. I mean, she got a bunch of certifications, and she's like, "Nobody wants to hire me because I don't have any experience." And I said, "But you do have experience." And she says, "What do you mean?" I said, "When you were in class and we were troubleshooting and we were going through the scenarios that I gave you, that was experience. You can put down that you have troubleshooting experience. You don't have to say how long, but you actually have troubleshooting experience. We did it in class." When, later on, I worked with her, I helped her. She actually built a server stack in her apartment. And I said, "So now you have experience of building a stack, scripting and running the scripts on the servers, the switches. You set up, the routers, you set up servers, Active Directory. You built the entire environment for a domain and a network in your apartment." So I said, "There you have that experience. The time that it's up, you now have administrative experience." So was Active Directory domain administrator in a Soho organization, small office, home office. She didn't have to tell them it was her apartment, for 1 year, 2 years. So there's ways to get the practical experience and to put it on your resume. You're not lying. You're telling the truth. You've done the work. You've actually, fingers on the keys. You've worked through the troubleshooting and stuff. You just didn't do it for a major organization. It doesn't mean the experience is any less valid. Troubleshooting a router and a switch or a network is the same doing it in your living room as it is in a major organization. You just have a bigger network and more of them. So hopefully that answers your question.
It absolutely does. Thank you very much, Larry.
she now makes in excess of 150,000 a year, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks. I probably need to get some experience under my belt.
Yeah.
I got
She's
you,
one of my-
Ollie. Don't worry about it. I got you.
She's one of my proud. I tell her all the time. Every once in a while, she'll call me up because she travels a lot for her organization because she does incident response and some other stuff for the organization she works for. So she travels a lot now. So when she's in town, we'll get together and have lunch. I tell her, I said, I brag about you all the time. I said, you're one of my greatest accomplishments. I said, nobody does what you did. Nobody quits their job and just jumps 100% into IT with no idea whether or not they're going to be successful at it or not.
Yeah, that takes a lot of guts.
So, any other questions?
All right. If no one else has any questions for Mr. Larry, again, Larry, my friend, I appreciate you, man. I owe you lunch.
Hey, no problem, brother. I got you.
All right, man. I appreciate you, brother, man. Take it easy and get to that family, man.
James, there's one
Yes.
question from Jack in the chat. Do you want me to read that off?
Yes, because I don't see it.
Okay. He says, I'm in the process of trying to break into the penetration and offenses security side of cybersecurity. Do you have any feedbacks on preferred certifications and or skills to build that would allow to enter with no experience?
So I'll be honest with you. Trying to go straight into being a gray or white hat and going into pen testing, unless you are an IT geek and you started when you were 5 years old and you can write scripts and just do all kinds of amazing things on the back end of a computer or a server, you're gonna have to get some time in just working, being a security guy, being a network guy, being a security guy, to get that background knowledge down and the information down, before anybody's going to probably really give you that shot at doing pen testing or, on either side, whether you're doing, so because you have pen testing both being the good guy and the bad guy. So one thing I would say is getting a certification, like CompTIA has a certification in pen testing. They also have one as a cybersecurity analyst. So the pen testing is the offensive, the security analyst is the defensive. It's more impressive if you have both certifications because then you're telling whoever's looking at it, saying, hey, I know both sides. I can do both sides.
Thank you very much, Larry. Jack, I hope that addresses your question. If not, please turn on your mic and take over the conversation. Okay, I guess that's it.
All righty.
Thank you very much, Jack. Larry, sorry.
Yep. Hey, no problem. Hey, I hope everybody got something out of today. And, you have a great instructor with James. So by all means, pick his brain. He's a wealth of resources and knowledge there. So take advantage of it in your coming days and classes with him. So he's the real deal. So take advantage of it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. On that, I'm going to go ahead and bow out, and I'll let James close out whatever he's got to do with you guys. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks. Have a good one, Larry.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye now. James, do you have any final words, or are we good to call it a day?
So, yeah, I would say that the only final words I have, again, just to kind of touch on Jack's question again, too, is, and I will say this for the students who've had me in any of my cyber classes, is that cybersecurity is multifaceted. There's many aspects of cybersecurity you can get to, and you may find that you like all of them, but then there may be a niche that you really like. So don't limit yourself. Be multifaceted, and be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And what I mean by that is you're always having your head on a swivel from a cybersecurity standpoint. It makes you more marketable when you do that. And it makes you an asset to any organization. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, Ollie, Brian, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't have anything else for anybody else.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you,
day,
gentlemen.
everybody.
Good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for your time.